Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The city bustled beneath a shimmering sky, where towering spires of glass and steel reached toward the heavens. From his vantage point high above the ground, Nathan Drake gazed down at the metropolis, a picture of humanity's triumphs and advancements. Yet, beneath the surface of this thriving civilization lay a secret so profound that it threatened to unravel the very fabric of existence. The Temporal Defense Initiative, or TDI, had uncovered the truth, a truth that sent shivers down Nathan's spine. The Chronaxians, an ancient alien civilization, had perfected the art of time manipulation. With their technology, they could alter the course of history, turning the tides of battles long fought and won, bending the will of entire nations, and paving the way for their eventual conquest of Earth. Nathan had been chosen for this mission not because of his skills alone, though they were many, but because of his resilience, his ability to adapt, and his unwavering determination. He had been equipped with the temporal anchor, a device that shielded him from the effects of time manipulation, allowing him to retain his memories and identity even as the world around him shifted and changed. As he prepared for his first jump, the reality of what lay ahead weighed heavily on his mind. He knew that failure was not an option. If he did not succeed, humanity's future would be rewritten, with the Chronaxians as its authors. The temporal anchor hummed softly, a sound that seemed to resonate with the very air around him. With a final nod to the TDI technicians monitoring his progress, Nathan activated the device. The world blurred, colors and shapes melting into one another as time bent and twisted around him. When the haze cleared, he found himself standing in the heart of ancient Rome. The sounds of the bustling marketplace filled his ears, the clatter of hooves on cobblestones, the shouts of merchants peddling their wares, the laughter of children running through the streets. The air was thick with the scent of spices, baked bread, and sweat. Nathan took a moment to orient himself. His mission was clear. The Chronaxians planned to alter the outcome of a critical battle that would shape the future of Western civilization. Their target was a military leader whose survival was crucial to Rome's dominance. If they succeeded, the course of history would be irrevocably altered. Disguised in the garb of a Roman citizen, Nathan blended into the crowd. His sharp eyes scanned the surroundings, searching for any sign of the alien agents. He knew they would be difficult to spot. The Chronaxians were masters of disguise, able to mimic human appearance flawlessly. As he navigated the winding streets of Rome, Nathan's senses were on high alert. He had only a limited window of time to locate and neutralize the threat. The temporal anchor vibrated subtly against his wrist, a reminder of the mission's urgency. After what felt like hours of searching, he spotted them, two men in Roman armor, but there was something off about their movements, too precise, too calculated. They were headed toward the Forum, where a key military leader was addressing his troops. Nathan followed, careful to keep his distance. The sun beat down on him, the heat oppressive, but he pushed through, focused on his task. As the men reached the Forum, Nathan saw their target, a general whose strategic brilliance had been instrumental in Rome's victories. If the Chronaxians succeeded in their assassination, the general's death would send shockwaves through history, weakening Rome at a crucial moment. The two alien agents moved in tandem, their hands reaching for hidden weapons. Nathan knew he had to act fast. With a burst of speed, he closed the distance between them, drawing a concealed blade. The fight was swift and brutal. The alien agents were strong, their reflexes honed by centuries of experience, but Nathan was faster. In a matter of seconds, both agents lay on the ground, their forms flickering as their disguises failed. Breathing heavily, Nathan quickly disposed of the bodies, ensuring there would be no trace of the Chronaxians' presence in this time. The general continued his speech, oblivious to the danger that had just passed. Nathan's heart pounded in his chest as he activated the temporal anchor once more. The world blurred and shifted around him as he was pulled forward through time. When the haze cleared again, Nathan found himself in the midst of the Middle Ages, surrounded by the stench of death. The Black Plague had ravaged Europe, leaving cities and towns desolate, their streets littered with corpses. The Chronaxians had chosen this time period to spread the plague further, ensuring that entire regions that had historically remained untouched would be decimated. Disguised as a traveling physician, Nathan navigated the perilous streets of a small European town. His heart ached at the sight of the suffering around him, but he could not afford to be distracted. His mission was to locate and stop the Chronaxians before they could contaminate the water sources, spreading the plague beyond its natural boundaries. The town's well was the center of the Chronaxians' plan. Nathan approached it cautiously, aware that the alien agents could be lurking nearby. He spotted them as they prepared to release a vial of poison into the well's water. There were 3 this time, their human disguises barely concealing the malevolent intent in their eyes. Nathan moved swiftly, his hand slipping to the hilt of his sword. He engaged the first agent, their blades clashing in a flurry of sparks. The fight was fierce, the Chronaxians were relentless, but Nathan's determination burned hotter than the sun above. He dispatched the first agent with a well-placed strike, then turned his attention to the second. The agent lunged at him, but Nathan sidestepped, driving his blade into the alien side. The final agent hesitated, glancing at the vial in his hand. Nathan knew he couldn't afford to let him get away. With a final, desperate effort, he lunged forward, knocking the vial from the agent's hand and delivering the finishing blow. The vial shattered on the ground, its contents seeping harmlessly into the dirt. Nathan stood panting over the bodies, the weight of his actions heavy on his shoulders. He had saved the town, but the fight was far from over. The temporal anchor buzzed on his wrist, urging him onward. With one last glance at the desolate town, Nathan activated the device, feeling the familiar pull as time bent around him once more. This time, he emerged in the midst of the Industrial Revolution. The air was thick with the smell of coal and steam, the sounds of machinery clanking and whirring in the background. The Chronaxians had chosen this era to sabotage humanity's technological progress, targeting key inventions that would lead to the modern age. Nathan's target was a small industrial town where a brilliant inventor was on the brink of creating a machine that would revolutionize manufacturing. The Chronaxians had already infiltrated the town, posing as workers in the inventor's factory. Their plan was to destroy the machine before it could be completed, halting the progress of human innovation. Disguised as a laborer, Nathan entered the factory. The heat from the forges was almost unbearable, but he pushed through, his eyes scanning the room for the alien agents. He spotted them near the back, where the inventor's machine was being assembled. Nathan knew he had to act quickly. The Chronaxians were already planting explosives around the machine's base. Nathan moved with purpose, his steps silent as he approached the agents. The sound of the factory's machinery drowned out any noise as he drew his weapon. The fight that ensued was brutal and chaotic. The factory's narrow corridors offered little room to maneuver, but Nathan used the environment to his advantage. He fought with the ferocity of a man who knew the fate of the world depended on his success. One by one, the agents fell, their bodies crumpling to the ground. Nathan quickly disarmed the explosives, ensuring the machine's safety. The inventor, unaware of the danger he had been in, continued his work, oblivious to the fact that his creation would soon change the world. Nathan allowed himself a brief moment of relief as he exited the factory. The temporal anchor hummed once more, signaling the end of this mission. He activated the device, feeling the familiar rush as time folded around him. When he emerged from the time stream, Nathan found himself standing in a desolate, ruined city. The sky was a sickly shade of gray, and the air was thick with the smell of decay. This was the future, a future where the Chronaxians had established their stronghold. Their base was hidden deep within the city, protected by layers of temporal distortions. Nathan knew this would be his final mission. The Chronaxians' time core, the source of their power, was located at the heart of this base. Destroying it would reset the timeline, undoing all the damage they had done. But the base was heavily fortified, and Nathan would have to face the Chronaxians' best warriors to reach the core. Steeling himself, Nathan made his way through the ruins, avoiding the patrols of Chronaxian soldiers. The temporal anchor pulsed against his wrist, guiding him toward the base's entrance. The air around him crackled with energy as he passed through the temporal distortions, his mind focused on the task at hand. When he finally reached the core, Nathan was met with a sight that took his breath away. The time core was a massive, pulsating orb of light, its energy radiating outward in waves. The Chronaxian leader stood before it, his eyes glowing with a cold, unearthly light. "You've come far, human," the leader said, his voice echoing through the chamber. "But this is where your journey ends." Nathan tightened his grip on his weapon, his gaze unwavering. "Not if I have anything to say about it." The battle that followed was unlike anything Nathan had ever experienced. The Chronaxian leader was a formidable opponent, his movements swift and precise. But Nathan fought with everything he had, knowing that the fate of humanity rested on his shoulders. The two clashed in a storm of energy and steel, the chamber shaking with the force of their blows. Nathan's mind raced as he searched for an opening, a weakness in the leader's defenses. Finally, with a surge of adrenaline, he saw his chance. He lunged forward, driving his blade into the heart of the time core. The explosion was instantaneous. The chamber was filled with blinding light as the core detonated, sending shockwaves through the base. Nathan felt himself being pulled into the maelstrom, the temporal anchor straining to hold him in place, and then, everything went black. When Nathan awoke, he found himself lying on a grassy hill, the sun shining down on him. The air was fresh and clean, the sky a brilliant blue. He sat up, his heart pounding in his chest as he looked around. The world was as it should be, untouched by the Chronaxians' influence. The Temporal Defense Initiative had done its job. The timeline had been reset, and humanity's future was once again secure. But as Nathan stood and dusted himself off, he knew that the fight was never truly over. There would always be threats, always be challenges. But for now, he had earned a moment of peace. With a final glance at the peaceful world around him, Nathan turned and walked away, his mission complete. The world moved forward, unaware of the battles fought and the sacrifices made to secure its future. Nathan Drake walked through the sunlit fields, the weight of his journey still heavy on his mind, yet the world around him was vibrant, full of life. Birds sang in the trees, and a soft breeze carried the scent of wildflowers. The serenity of this scene contrasted sharply with the chaos and violence he had just endured, making it feel almost surreal. But Nathan knew better than to question the peace. He had seen enough of the universe's cruel twists to understand that moments like these were fleeting. His thoughts drifted back to the battles he had fought across time, each one a critical juncture where humanity's fate had hung in the balance. The ancient Roman streets, the plague-ridden villages of the Middle Ages, the industrial factories, each a battlefield where his victories had subtly realigned history. And finally, the time core, the pulsating heart of the Chronaxians' power, now destroyed, resetting the timeline and erasing their influence from existence. The gravity of what he had accomplished was only just beginning to settle in. He had saved humanity, not just in one era, but across millennia. As he continued to walk, Nathan's senses remained alert, his instincts honed by years of training and experience. Though the temporal anchor had done its job, and the Chronaxians were no more, he couldn't shake the feeling that his work wasn't finished. There was a nagging sense, deep in his gut, that something still lingered, something unresolved. It was the kind of instinct that had kept him alive through countless missions, and he had learned to trust it implicitly. The landscape began to change as Nathan followed a narrow path through a dense forest. The trees grew taller, their branches interwoven to form a thick canopy that cast dappled shadows on the ground. The air grew cooler, carrying with it the earthy scent of moss and damp soil. The sounds of the world outside the forest grew distant, muffled by the dense foliage. It was as though he had stepped into a different world, one that was isolated, untouched by the events that had transpired. Nathan pushed through the underbrush, the path narrowing further until it was little more than a faint trail. His steps were cautious, each movement calculated. His eyes scanned the surroundings, taking in every detail. There was something about this place that felt different, something that made his heart beat just a little faster. He couldn't quite place it, but it was as if the very air around him was charged with a strange energy. He came upon a clearing, and in the center stood a single stone monument, ancient and weathered by time. The markings on its surface were indecipherable, but they radiated an aura of power that was unmistakable. Nathan approached cautiously, his hand instinctively moving to the temporal anchor. As he drew closer, he could feel the device pulse against his wrist, reacting to the monument's presence. There was a resonance here, something that connected with the temporal anchor in a way that was both familiar and entirely new. Nathan's mind raced as he considered the possibilities. Could this be a remnant of the Chronaxians? Had they left something behind, something that even the destruction of the time core hadn't erased? Nathan reached out, his fingers brushing against the cold stone. The moment he made contact, a surge of energy coursed through him, and the world around him shifted. It wasn't the disorienting blur of time travel he had experienced before. This was different, more focused, more controlled. He felt a tug at the edges of his consciousness, pulling him into something deeper, something beyond the physical world. Visions flooded his mind, images of worlds long past, battles fought and lost, civilizations rising and falling. And at the center of it all was the Chronaxian leader, his cold, calculating eyes fixed on Nathan. The leader's voice echoed in Nathan's mind, a haunting whisper that carried with it the weight of millennia. "You think you've won, human," the voice sneered, "but time is not so easily conquered. The threads of history are delicate, and even the slightest disturbance can unravel everything." Nathan fought to push the voice out of his mind, but it was relentless. The visions intensified, showing him alternate realities, timelines where the Chronaxians had succeeded, where humanity had fallen. The horrors were unimaginable, a world plunged into eternal darkness, where the Chronaxians ruled with an iron fist, crushing any resistance underfoot. "No!" Nathan shouted, the word echoing through the clearing. He ripped his hand away from the stone, stumbling back as the visions faded. His breathing was ragged, his heart pounding in his chest. The forest around him seemed to close in, the shadows growing darker, more oppressive. But Nathan wasn't about to give in to despair. He had come too far, fought too hard to let the Chronaxians win now. He steadied himself, drawing on every ounce of strength and determination he had left. The visions had shown him the stakes, and he knew that even with the time core destroyed, the battle wasn't over. The stone monument stood silent and unmoving, but Nathan could feel the energy it radiated, a connection to the time stream that was still intact, still vulnerable to manipulation. If the Chronaxians had left behind any part of their power, it was here, within this stone. And if there was even the slightest chance that they could use it to reassert their control, Nathan had to act. He activated the temporal anchor once more, its energy mingling with that of the monument. The device pulsed rapidly, responding to the monument's power. Nathan concentrated, focusing his mind on the task at hand. He had to sever the connection, break whatever link the Chronaxians had left behind. The world around him began to blur again, but this time it wasn't the chaotic rush of time travel. It was more deliberate, more controlled. Nathan felt the temporal anchor resonate with the monument, amplifying its energy. The connection grew stronger, and Nathan could feel the tendrils of the Chronaxians' influence beginning to fray. With a final surge of effort, Nathan channeled all of the temporal anchor's power into the monument. The stone began to glow, its surface cracking as the energy within it built to a critical point. Nathan gritted his teeth, every muscle in his body straining as he pushed the device to its limits. Then, with a deafening crack, the monument shattered, the energy within it exploding outward in a blinding flash of light. Nathan was thrown back, the force of the blast knocking the wind out of him. He lay on the ground, his vision swimming, the taste of blood in his mouth, but as the light faded, Nathan knew that he had succeeded. The connection was severed, the Chronaxians' last hold on the timeline destroyed. The air around him was still, the forest silent once more. Nathan pushed himself up, wincing as pain shot through his body. He was battered and bruised, but alive. The temporal anchor was quiet now, its job complete. Nathan looked down at the shattered remains of the monument, the stones lying in a heap at the center of the clearing. There was no sign of the energy that had once radiated from them, no trace of the power they had held. Nathan took a deep breath, letting the cool air fill his lungs. The danger had passed, the threat averted. But as he stood there, alone in the clearing, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. The world around him felt different, as if the destruction of the monument had shifted the balance of reality in some subtle way. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew that humanity's fate was once again in its own hands. The Chronaxians were gone, their influence erased, and the timeline had been restored. But Nathan also knew that the universe was vast, and there were always new dangers lurking in the shadows. With a final look at the clearing, Nathan turned and walked away, leaving the ruins behind. The path through the forest was clear now, the shadows receding as the sun broke through the canopy above. Nathan's steps were steady, his resolve unshaken. He had fought to protect the future, and he would continue to do so for as long as he was able. The world was safe, for now. But Nathan knew that peace was always temporary, and he would be ready when the next battle came. For now, though, he allowed himself to savor the victory, knowing that he had done what needed to be done. And as he walked out of the forest, back into the light, he knew that he was ready for whatever the future held.